Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about syntax. Last week we finished talking about morphology, where we looked at words and its different parts. This week we're going to talk about words but in relationship to each other. So we're going to take a little bit more of a holistic perspective on this and look at how words are organized in sentences and phrases. So the objectives of today's lesson are to be able to diagram verb, noun, and prepositional phrases. You also should be able to identify parts of speech and distinguish between different types of ambiguity. You should also be able to describe how transformations between statements to questions or to negative statements or to passive statements work. And identify and describe the linear word order in different languages. And hopefully all of this will help you to describe and use terminology to analyze and discuss the syntactical usage of English language learners' written samples. Okay, so before we start, let's look at this sentence. You'll notice that there are words missing, and it's made up of words that don't necessarily exist in English. But you can easily read these words because they represent sounds that and phonemic sequences that exist in English. So because the subject of today's session is syntax, we're going to test your syntactic knowledge to see if you're going to be able to place these words in the appropriate slots. So the sentence says, something schmabies, something spoffled, and something, some floggery, something. So my question to you is, where should these words go? Okay, so if you want to take a second, you can pause the video and try and figure out where you would place each of these words. You can do that, and then we can regroup. So let's see. If any of you placed Frabby as this one right here, Frabby, here, Frabby schmabies, and then glarbed, Bramishly, right here, spoffled, and glarbed some floggerby donflons, you would be right. And if you ask yourself, how did you know, right, that this was Frabby, first slot was Frabby, the second slot was Bramishly, the third spot was glarbed, and the fourth spot was donflons. One of the reasons that helped you to place those words into the right slots, even though they're nonsense words, is because partly of the placement of the word, but also because of some of the morphology that we're using. So if we look at the first word, Frabby, we can see that the Y at the end of Frabby reminds us of an adjective, right? And we know that adjectives go before nouns. We know that schmabies looks like a noun because it carries the suffix ies, which we know is the plural suffix. And then Bramishly has the ly, and we know that adverbs go before verbs, and adverbs contain that ly. Glarbed has that ed ending, and so that would signify to us that it's a verb, so it goes with spoffled and glarbed. And then floggerby looks like an adjective to us, right? And we know that it seems like an adjective because it takes place before a noun, and so this would let us know that this last space right here would be a noun. And donflons has an S, and we know that we can only pluralize nouns. Right? So you can see here that you used a combination of your morphology knowledge to sort of signal the part of speech of the word, and also your knowledge of syntax, right? The organization of these different types of words to figure out where these different words go. Basically, there are a couple of things to keep in mind with regard to syntax. The first is that grammatically correct sentences must conform to patterns, right, dictated by the language, by the rules of language. So even though we have brand new sentences that you may have never heard before or written before, such as the elephant flogged the taxi driver's sunglasses, right, something completely ridiculous, we still have rules that dictate where those different words are placed in that sentence. Our grammatical knowledge about syntax also lets us know what is correct and what is incorrect in terms of placement. And as you hopefully have gathered from this exercise, The ordering of words in a sentence, in speech, gives us clues to the word class that it belongs to. So, for example, we talked about adjectives and adverbs and verbs and nouns. And the morphology, the suffixes, gave us clues about the parts of speech. And the parts of speech gave us clues into where they should belong in a sentence. Okay, so in syntax, when we think about words and their relationship to other words, the way that syntax diagrams it out is it places or it groups words together to make phrases, and then phrases group together to make sentences. And when we draw the hierarchical word order of sentences, we actually see this grouping of words into phrases and then into sentences. And that's what we're going to focus on for most of the lesson today. But first, before we do that, to get to that, let's talk about the different phrases that exist in syntax. The first type of phrase is a noun phrase. And it consists of a noun and all words or phrases that modify that noun. So that includes determiners on adjectives which modify the noun, such as the red balloon, right? The being the determiner, red being the adjective, balloon being the noun. And then even after that noun, there can be other phrases, such as prepositional phrases, which we'll get to in a moment, that can tell us information about that noun phrase, that red balloon. So here's a very simple noun phrase, the student. Okay. Here's a more complex noun phrase, the Asian student from China. So here we see the determiner, Asian, the adjective, student, our noun. That makes our simple noun phrase. And then afterwards we have a prepositional phrase, which is actually just a noun phrase and a preposition in front of it. So from being the preposition, China is our noun, but because from is the preposition in front of the noun makes it a prepositional phrase. And this is how we would draw it out, right? Determiner plus noun equals noun phrase. We also have verb phrases, which is a verb and all words or phrases that modify it. Verbs, when they come in front of noun phrases, they subsume that noun phrase and make it a verb phrase. Okay? So here's a very simple verb phrase. A verb, likes, and then a noun phrase, the food. So together, that would be a verb phrase. Here's a more complex verb phrase. A verb, likes, the noun phrase, the food, and then a prepositional phrase, which is telling us about the food at the cafeteria, would be subsumed all together into a verb phrase. Okay, this is how you would draw it right over here. So you would have verb, noun phrase equals verb phrase. And then lastly, the prepositional phrase consists of a preposition and a noun phrase, like at being our preposition, the cafeteria being the noun phrase, so together it equals the prepositional phrase. So we have the student likes the food at the cafeteria. Let's see how that would be written out in terms of diagramming. So the first thing that we do is we look at our noun phrase at the end of the sentence, and we know that it's the cafeteria, right? And that makes our noun phrase. But we do see that in front there's a preposition. So that tells us that together this would make a prepositional phrase. Then we keep looking forward and we see the food. We know that the food is a noun phrase. And then if we look in front of the food, there's a verb. But before we get to the verb, we see that there's a noun phrase in front of a prepositional phrase. And we know that a noun phrase can subsume a prepositional phrase. Remember how we said student likes the food at the cafeteria. So together this would be a noun phrase. When we see in front of this noun phrase is a verb, right? So together would be a verb phrase. And then what's left is the noun phrase, which we join into making a sentence. Okay, so the highest tier is always S, which stands for sentence. So we can see that the sentence is made up of a noun phrase and a verb phrase, which is made up of a noun phrase and a prepositional phrase. So the linear order should be S equals MP plus VP. S equals MP plus VP. Here I want to show you another example of what that looks like. Okay, and this time we're going to work with a little bit of ambiguity in order to showcase how the diagramming might look very different. Okay. So we have two scenarios. The first one is the sentence, put the box on the table in the kitchen. So what it means is, see how the box on the table is underlined? It means that there's a box on the table that someone wants you to put in the kitchen. They want you to put the box in the kitchen. And they're telling you that the box is on the table so that you know where to find the box in order to put it in the kitchen. Okay? So let's diagram this sentence out first. So let's find our noun phrases. So we see the box is our noun phrase. We see the table is our noun phrase plus a preposition is a prepositional phrase. Okay? Together we know that this makes a noun phrase. And the reason why we've decided to put these two together, right, is because we know that on the table is telling us information about the box. It's where the box is located. Okay, so together makes one noun phrase. Then we have the verb phrase, right, because a verb plus a noun phrase equals a verb phrase. And we have the kitchen and in as the prepositional phrase that stands alone. Okay? And together it makes a sentence. So the sentence here is S equals VP plus PP. And VP and PP exist on the same tier. Okay? Let's see how that's different when we have a different scenario. Now we have that box, right? So we have put the box on the table in the kitchen. Same sentence, but different meaning. Okay? So we have the box, and we want to put it in the kitchen, but specifically on the table in the kitchen. Do you see how that is different to the first example? Okay? In the first example, the box is on the table, and then we wanted to put the box in the kitchen wherever. But here, it's different. So you see that the underlined portion, that in the kitchen, which is going to turn into our prepositional phrase, is what is modifying the table. Okay, so that's what's going to govern why we're going to put this together as a noun phrase, as we did over here. Okay, so let's look at it. So we have our noun phrases, right? The box, the table, and then the kitchen was a noun phrase, plus the preposition makes it a prepositional phrase. This becomes our verb phrase, because there's a verb in front of it. This becomes our noun phrase altogether, because remember, the noun phrase and the prepositional phrase make it a noun phrase, just like it did in this case. But see how there's a preposition here. So the preposition makes this a prepositional phrase. So the verb phrase plus the prepositional phrase equals the sentence. But the sentence is diagrammed in a very different way than that one. And the reason why is because the meaning is different.